Inspect is where I'm going to just pull the same principles that I would have otherwise with the confrontation, which is really actually allowing an uncomfortable conversation to happen. And so when a comment is made or when the invitation is made to really go down that path with that person, you're recognizing and you're like, okay, that's a growth opportunity. So let's keep going with that.
You have choice to get involved in the dialogue or to not get involved in the dialogue. And if it's a dialogue you're not comfortable getting involved in, you can say, I appreciate the fact that this is something that you want to dive into. However, I'm not comfortable having this conversation and I'm not going to engage in the dialogue. Hey everybody, it's Bianca.
Welcome back, Evolvers. It's Emilia.
If you clicked on this episode, you are in for some spicy spice. It also means that you, like
Mhm.
so many other people, are definitely feeling the feels when it comes to the holidays and the holiday season. And you're definitely not alone in that. You know, this is a thing that you and I talk about all the time, that the holidays are such a hard time for so many people. And now we're
Mhm.
going to compound on top of it the recent election that happened and just how challenging and uncomfortable it has been for so many people and will be when you combine the difficulties of the holiday season with something that's really pervasive like
Yeah.
that together. So the purpose of this dialogue today is just to really have an open and honest conversation about that. Like, how do you how do you get through the holidays? How do you, like, what are we all supposed to do? Because a lot of us have a hard time around this time of year anyways, and
Mhm.
a lot of us don't know how to navigate it. So what most people do is they either just stay quiet and don't say anything, or they won't go, or they'll get into big fights or whatever, but nobody actually knows a good way to get through it.
So
So
true.
we hope that by the end of this episode, you know, we'll be able to shed some light into what should you actually do? How do you get through it? How do you navigate these uncomfortable conversations?
Yeah, I was in a relationship talks coaching call with Alan with one of our clients, actually be this week right after we had group coaching. It was a
Mhm.
long night and it was wonderful. And I mentioned that because of the dialogue that we had gotten into. And of course, I'll keep it anonymous, but essentially, it's this younger couple who are crushing their goals and their dreams. And we checked in and obviously we asked like how were the last 2 weeks because for a lot of people, and this is when this episode is coming out, we're recording this probably 2 weeks after the whole election, right? So the whole election politically, globally is rocking our world. And it's not just about the election, it's so much more. And when we were
So
checking in
much
and
more.
asking them about how it was and were you guys on the same page and all that stuff, it really brought up a lot of how much what you just said, B, a lot of us, and we're not just going to be talking about election stuff. It's really the impact around the holidays and what that has on us. And that conversation gleaned light to what you just said, which is we usually swing from either completely avoid or completely confront. And this
Mhm.
couple was talking about how they kind of swung more on the completely avoid, talking about the impacts of the election and the conversations and the social circles that are being impacted. And when we had talked about, well, we do know that the holidays are coming up, and that is already a stressful time for people, right? In general, right? You have the strain on the budget, you have expectations, you have family members that you don't really care for, but because you're blood, right? You got to show up. But all these feelings of pressure. You have quarterly end results, right? Work, finance, all these things. There's so many elements here. And we had asked them, how did you guys deal with conflict? And the dialogue that we had there, B, was very similar to a dialogue you and I had earlier in this week, where you had asked me, like, how do you sit in a room with someone who has totally opposing views? And how do you navigate around all of the challenge that comes with that? And holiday dinners are like literally like epic for this because you might completely disagree with
Mm.
the people sitting around the table. You might not even know them. How do you sit in that conversation and or contribute to that? And wildly, how do you actually have a good time? And I had shared with you, B, that we had an Evolve article that I had written about this. How do you find the connection amongst division is what it was called. And
Mm.
I think that what I had written in there is I'm going to pull out and tease out in this episode for us because when we find ourselves thinking about the holidays, studies show that the angst starts, the despair, the feelings around the holidays, it starts even before October. So by the time our listeners are listening to this, they're already in it, right? We're in the throngs thrusted into it, and it happens every year. But
Yeah.
we do not have to respond the same way this year. And that's what I hope this episode does. So, first thing, it highlights how terrible we as human beings do when it comes to conflict. We actively are so uncomfortable when it comes to conflict. And what's underneath that? When we can understand what's underneath that, we can at least have a starting point. And this is what we said to our clients, which is we have a biological imperative to belong. But you and I know this. Every single time we get into a call, we want to check in, see how each other are doing. And you and I have a relationship such that like you're like, I'm good. Like let's kick in a gear. But a lot of people, when you're sitting around the table or thinking around the holidays and what that might look like, a lot of us struggle to really understand like, can we even be safe here? Can we bring
Mm.
our full authentic self to the holiday circle? The holiday who be whaty, whatever's going on?
Hmm.
And more often than not, the answer is no. Why? Because we don't feel comfortable being able to navigate where we conflict, where we don't fit in, where we don't belong, and where we might be different than the majority of the people that are going to be there. And so, cue the uncomfortable holiday conversations. What we hear from our clients, politics come up. What we hear from our clients is, why aren't you married yet? Or why are you single? Or why are you this? Or why are you that? Essentially, uncomfortable conversations revolve around drama that someone doesn't want to be involved with,
Mhm.
right? Um, and then the second biggest thing is personal choice. And personal choice is where the conflict really rubs, right? Whether it be politics, whether that be how you're partnered, who you're partnered with, what you're doing in life, what your choices are, your career, blah, 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 blah. It comes down to personal choice.
A lot of
And
body choice too. A lot of people, like their aunties and uncles, whatever, making like, "Oh, you gained weight. Oh, you lost weight. Oh, whatever." Like a lot
oh,
of
yeah.
body shaming dialogue too, especially in my culture.
Yeah, I remember you mentioning that actually last year about like how we had talked about like how do you navigate some of those like, oh, you look great. It's like these are like conversations that are passive aggressive in passing. Like people think that they do no harm, but so many people just exist and are doing so much more harm than they think in those small interactions, right? Because it's like you don't know, like what? Stop. So, what might be helpful for our listeners in this episode is recognizing first get an assessment 0 to 10. How do you handle, like, how do you feel as though you handle conflict?
Mm.
If 10 is I am running to the conflict, I'm so excited to talk politics and talk about my personal choices with my Uncle Joe this holiday. I can't wait to rumble at the table. I can't wait to have some liquor involved because that's what makes the night fun. That's what gets me
Woof.
going. If you're a 10 at like aggressive head to the confrontation and you know that that is your tendency, go ahead and rate yourself. If you're the person that is on the other end, which is actively avoiding any confrontation, any uncomfortable conversation, such that you don't even want to go, you're at the end of the zero. So rate yourself 0 to 10. Where are you in terms of your comfort with conflict?
Can we add a specifier to that?
Sure.
Let's talk specifically about with family because some people can do this really well with friends, but they're really not good at it with family. Like I'm really good at bringing up difficult conversations between you and and like with my clients, but
Yeah.
I still struggle with it a little bit when it comes to family. So, let's Are you okay with us adding a little bit of a specifier just regarding with family? How would you rate yourself?
Yeah, I actually think that's so, so important. And I'm really glad that you brought that to the table because of the inherent power dynamics that are within and involved within family, right? If it's a group of friends, you don't have the concern around my friend was my dad, my friend was my mom, my friend was my sibling, right? Like those power dynamics that exist in those social structures in your family of origin and cousins, siblings, etc. Is they just don't exist around those things.
Social and also cultural. Like, what does your culture say about um, difficult conversations with your elders? Is it very much a respect your elders dynamic and you don't fight what your family says? Or was the culture in your family, we're all individuals and everybody has a right to their own voice?
Mm, great
The
point.
latter was definitely not my instance. And for many people, I
Hard
think
and
the
true.
majority of people, it very much was do
Yeah.
as I say, not as I do. Respect your
Mhm.
elders. Don't ever raise your voice or don't ever like question authority. It was very much like we are the parent, you're the child, obey. And so it makes
Right.
it that much harder.
Yeah. It's so true. Yeah, and, I had a recent experience with my family too that, like, I had acknowledged what holidays I do and don't celebrate, like, now that I'm really in my own autonomous space, it's I'm totally unsubscribing to all of the holidays and all the things that I never, ever, 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 ever holistically enjoyed. And the degree of skill that I've acquired to be able to get here, it has been so scary every single step of the way. Like, there's a part of me that's
Mhm.
been terrified every single step of the way because the biggest fear, if you add on the biological imperative that we feel we need to belong, and then we tack on quote unquote our tribe, right? Our family of origin and the need to belong and be accepted by our family and loved by our family. And then on top of that, the cultural shame if you're not, that is a lot of pressure. And so this is a very scary topic for a lot of people. It is behaviorally, it impacts us so much so that we are doing things and we're saying things and we're consuming things that on an average day we wouldn't be doing, saying, thinking, or feeling. And that's why these holiday conversations, especially when it comes to family, is so scary. Right. So we want to
Mhm.
acknowledge that you're far from alone. This is a global phenomena. Like, I have clients from Germany to Bali to all different parts of this world, and it doesn't matter where you actively are living. This is a shared thing around the world that you're not alone in. So, what do we do when the uncomfortable conversations come up, right? Bianca and I believe what would be most helpful in this episode is to not go through the prep work, right? That's where, if you want to do that work, that's where one on one coaching or therapy is going to be the most helpful thing for you. We want to help you retort when the moment comes up. So, number one, you already have the tool of assessing 0 to 10. Where are you at with conflicts? That you have a baseline awareness of what your skill set really is and how your conflict style is, right? Number
Mhm.
two, it is literally in the moment where you register. This is the uncomfortable conversation that I don't want to have. Okay, we're going to focus the last 5-10 minutes on this episode in on when that moment strikes. Okay. The second thing is, what are your go to responses when you recognize and identify that this is the uncomfortable conversation? So, B, you had mentioned, right? Like an aunt brings up, let's say, the setting, right? Brings up a comment about your body image. Oh, it looks like you've lost weight. You look so good, blah, 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 says something about your body image, right? You immediately acknowledge the fact internally, this is not the conversation that I want to have, and I'm uncomfortable and I'm not looking to grow here because of whatever, right? What would your go-to retort be? Or what has been helpful for you in the past? Do you have anything that you want to bring to the table that you have done in the past? Otherwise, there's a couple of different go-tos that I'd give.
My my response is always just kinda making fun of them back when they
Yeah,
do stuff because my aunts are ridiculous.
right.
Um, I just make light of it,
Yeah.
you know, because like, I know that they're not I know that they don't have the capacity or the capability to have a really in-depth dialogue. And so when like one of my aunts in particular, she always makes a joke and she's like she'll make a comment about my just certain features
Mhm.
of my body. She'll be like, "Oh my god, da, 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 da," or whatever. And I'm like, "Yeah. When are you going to come to the gym with me?"
Yeah.
And I just
Nice.
leave it at that. I'll just leave it at that. Cuz
Okay.
she knows I'm kind of calling her out a little bit, but I'm also making it light and a joke to make it lighthearted.
Right. Okay. So I'm gonna take this into a three-prong approach. Not three-prong, but three different categories. So what you had just given the example for is a deflective, right? So that's the deflective approach. Humor is one of those things where if you can be on the spot and improv humor back, deflecting whatever comment or conversation that you think your aunt wants to have in this case, if you can deflect it, and what you did was put it back on her, right? That is a lot easier than going into a conversation. The second thing is reflective. Reflective is what you said your aunt doesn't have the capacity for. So in that moment, you're literally gauging whether or not you want to have this uncomfortable conversation with this person, which is always coming down to your choice. So the reflective response would be something like this. Hmm. Like she says that to you, and you actually pause. You don't laugh. You don't make light of it. And you say something along the lines that's a little bit deeper. My goodness. You know, I didn't realize how observant you are, or making a comment that allows the reflection to just sit there and be Akko Taco space. Because essentially what that's doing to the aunt is recognizing, oh, I'm taking in what you're giving and it's not okay with me. I didn't realize you were so obsessed with body image. Thank you for letting me know that, right? You can toggle up or down the reflective nature. That is entirely your call, right? So, what that is doing, the difference between the deflective and the reflective is actually
I love
acknowledging,
that.
right? Is actually acknowledging what the other person's energy is coming at you. And it's pretty
Mhm.
much um it's a diffusive tactic that helps you not necessarily take in, but rather like this is that invisible boundary that I'm going to let you know that is right here and you just went to go cross it and that's not okay with me. Right? So being in your reflective state that essentially takes what they said and you share an observation back to them, that is so huge.
I saw this video on TikTok the other day and I loved it so much. This person was parodying a dialogue and it was like a family member and this person and they were like, "Oh, you're so sensitive."
Mm.
And the person was reflecting back and you're like, "Oh, wow. It sounds like you have a really hard time with difficult emotions." And they're like, "Oh, all of you kids nowadays, you can't take a joke." And it's like, "Oh, it sounds like, you have a really hard time talking about difficult thoughts and feelings." And it just kept going on and on and on, doing exactly what you just said, basically being
Yeah.
like, "I know what you're trying to do.
Yeah.
I know what you're trying to say, but here's actually the deeper thing, and
Yeah.
I'm gonna call you out on it, but in a
Yeah,
gentle, loving way."
exactly, and that's a thing, like, and there's a something to be said about stereotyping different genders or not genders, I'm sorry, different, age gaps in this, right? There are
Yeah.
different age gaps and generations that are inherently more aware of the manipulation, the guilt tripping, the BS that are so pervasive in the family of origins dysfunction dynamics. And so the millennial generation is quote unquote what the boomer generation would call woke because of the fact that the millennial generation has been really the first generation to really acknowledge how family dysfunction is not okay and how it's actually really important to start to break that dysfunction. So when there
Yeah.
are comical, quote unquote, manipulative personal attacks, passive aggressive comments that are made, usually that come up in the holidays that are the open door for you to step into a trap, essentially a psychological trap during the holidays. A lot of us have to remind ourselves that we have the power to deflect, to reflect. And what do you think the third one is? If you were to imagine what's the third scenario that actually allows for even deeper? dialogue, and because neither of those actually went into the dialogue. It just pretty much said, "Hey, here's the boundary. I'm not interested in going there."
Probably confront.
Yeah, exactly.
Is that the term though?
We could use another term, but it is really confront because it's
I feel like
confronting.
confront has a really negative connotation though, because when people hear the word confrontation, it feels like problematic. Like there's gonna be a problem here. So maybe can we use a different word?
Yeah. So we have
Inspect? I don't know.
I love that actually because I was literally just gonna say one of the things that I really love to do is have things that sound similar, but you know the nuance. So we have deflect, we have reflect. Let's use inflect, or sorry, not inflect, inspect. Inspect is where it's I'm gonna just pull the same principles that I would have otherwise with the confrontation, which is really actually allowing an uncomfortable conversation to happen. And so when a comment is made or when the invitation is made to really go down that path with that person, you're recognizing and you're like, okay, that's a growth opportunity. So let's keep going with that. Do you want to keep going with the body image example or do you want to go
Yeah,
to
that's a good example. No, no,
okay.
no. Let's use the same example
Okay.
so we can
Yeah.
yeah, just keep going.
Okay, so your aunt says something and makes a comment in passing, and you decide you don't want to deflect, you don't want to reflect, but you actually do want to have a little micro movement forward because you want to have that uncomfortable growth, right? You don't necessarily know that your aunt's going to respond in a specific way, but you're testing the waters because maybe she's said that she's done the work on herself, whatever. Okay. Inspecting looks like let's use Auntie Carrie. Auntie Carrie is gonna be the name, okay? Auntie Carrie, and this is where I'm gonna take a couple of things in here. Auntie Carrie, I've observed that this comment has been made a couple of times, and it's and then insert what it is for you, how you feel about it. Whether it's okay, whether it's not okay, whether it makes you feel comfortable, uncomfortable, insert how it makes you feel, right? Or it contributes to feelings. I've noticed that every single time we get together, you happen to make a comment around my body image. And, I want to assume that it's coming from a really good place and that you want to connect. However, it really is contributing to some feelings of like discomfort. And it really makes me feel uncomfortable when you do comment on that. You know, I wonder, is there anything that maybe we could talk about instead when we see each other? Like something like that is really it doesn't escalate whatever conversation that is on your
Mhm.
end, but it really stems from a place of curiosity because you bring in an observation, you acknowledge how it makes you feel, and then you offer a solution, which is essentially taking the ACT, I'm sorry, not the ACT, NVC, nonviolent
Nonviolent
communication.
communication.
Yeah, because you're making a request and you're essentially acknowledging the boundary that she's hit. You're sharing that this is a pattern and you're acknowledging how it makes you feel, right? And you're taking ownership for how it makes you feel, whether it's uncomfortable, whether it makes you feel uneasy, et cetera, et cetera. And you're not necessarily putting it on her to do anything differently, but rather you're opening a door for invitation for her to then inspect because you offered an alternative solution or request to her. I would really prefer it when next I see you, you just give me a hug and say it's great to see you. And she might be so thrown off, right? Auntie Carrie might be like, "Geez, like I didn't realize you were like whatever." And if she starts to make a comment like that, then go right at your reflect. I'm for that. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say there's a high probability that with certain people in your life and certain relatives, they don't have the inspection skills to be able to hear
Yeah.
a comment like that without it being taken as an attack.
Right.
And so what they're likely to do is to deflect.
Yeah.
"Oh, you're just so sensitive. Oh, I didn't mean it like that. You know I care about you," whatever. They're likely to try to brush it aside or to make you wrong for saying what you said. The purpose of this is not
Yeah.
always to get a specific outcome. It's for you to demonstrate your abilities in doing something like this. Just because I put something out there doesn't mean somebody can give it back to me.
Right.
I'm not doing it for that purpose. I'm doing it to get into the habit of not allowing people to overstep my boundaries. And so when it comes to conversations about politics, which I guarantee every family or almost every family is going to dive into,
Yeah.
This is another area where you very much can do this. Let's say you have another relative that always wants to bring this up, and, you know, they whatever their political beliefs are, whether they're the left, the right, the middle, whatever, and they start having a dialogue and they try to get you involved. Again, the same principle applies.
Yeah.
You can deflect it, you can reflect, or you can inspect. It really comes down to your personal preferences. But the thing to remember is you have choice in this.
Yeah.
You have choice to get involved in the dialogue or to not get involved in the dialogue. And if it's a dialogue you're not comfortable getting involved in, you can say, I appreciate the fact that this is something that you want to dive into. However, I'm not comfortable having this conversation and I'm not going to engage in the dialogue.
Yeah.
What are they going to do? Force you to talk? And then if they try to continue, you can assert a boundary. So you can say,
1000%.
hey, listen, I'm really not comfortable with this. If we're going to continue having this dialogue, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to walk away.
Yeah.
Because that's how you set a boundary. A boundary is what you intend on doing.
Right.
So if this dialogue is going to continue, I'm going to take my food and I'm going to go sit in the other room because this isn't aligned for me.
Yeah. I was just gonna say, or
Yeah.
a suggestion on that element, if the dialogue is gonna continue, like, this is pretty much like you because more often than not, this is happening where other people are present. And so, usually what ends up happening is the person who's making a, personal attack on you within the family is actually doing the Darvo effect, which is what something I think a lot
What is it called?
the Darvo effect. Essentially, it's an acronym where long story short, it reverses so it's an acronym that stands for, deny, so they deny what they just did to you, they deny how it made you feel, they deny whatever you say, like, it is doing to you, so if Aunt Carrie again makes a comment, "Oh, you're too sensitive," is her actively denying whatever she just did. She's not actually taking ownership, which would be the opposite of that. So the D stands for deny. The A stands for actually attack, which is what we find ourselves like experiencing literally in a public, like a public place. We have these passive aggressive attacks, like you're too sensitive. Um, you know, I think that every single time someone mentions a comment about your body image, you just so happen to be, so aggressive. And what they do is after that, they reverse who the actual victim of the circumstance and the dysfunction is. And so it's like so comical when you see this happening because by the time that that is happening, you're around the table with your people or with your friend, you guys are sipping drinks, whatever. What's happening to the person that's pretty much getting picked on is the person who's picking on them, the bully in this circumstance, is actually reversing the victim in real time. And then, like, the O stands for offend. So then they play the victim role of you being too sensitive, and then they offend you as a result of that.
Deny, attack, reverse, victim,
Reverse victim
offend.
and defend. Yep, exactly.
Oh my god, the amount of times that that situation has probably happened for so many
So many
people is
people.
unbelievable.
Yeah,
Here's another aspect too, because we are not here as proponents of avoidance.
right.
Meaning we are not saying never have uncomfortable conversations because that doesn't fix anything.
Yeah.
I really do believe that a lot of people have just gotten into the habit of walking away from an uncomfortable dialogue and not being able to learn how to have
Healthy conflict.
difficult and challenging conversations and healthy conflict. Healthy conflict is really adaptive if you can do it intelligently. We've done
Mhm.
episodes on that, and my episode suggestion actually is one of the episodes where we talked about how to do that. But and we definitely should do an episode on the Darvo effect because that's wicked cool.
I would
But
love that. Yeah, let's do it.
for anyone who's listening to this right now, you have choice in what to do. You can deflect, you can reflect, you can inspect, you can walk away, you can
Mhm.
decide to engage in the dialogue and learn how to have healthy discussions and healthy confrontation and healthy challenging conversation. Like there's so much that you can do. But when we have this mindset of victimhood, when we have this helpless mindset that, oh my God, I'm going to be stuck in this situation and there's nothing I can do, it leaves you with no options.
Yeah.
And I very much used to be somebody who was like that.
Yeah.
And it didn't serve me at all. I was like, "Oh my god, I don't wanna go. This is gonna be so annoying, blah, 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 blah. I'm just gonna avoid them, or I'm gonna leave, or I'm gonna do this." And
Yeah, it's easier to do that.
for a lot of people, that actually is the right choice. For me, I was avoiding difficult conversations, and I was avoiding growth
Yeah.
because it was easier to avoid than it was to learn the tactical skills. So, like, this is one of the first years I actually feel pretty good about going into the holidays. Like, I'm excited to use a lot of the skills that I've learned. And now that I know the Darvo effect, I'm going to
Oh,
pick
yeah.
up on it because I guarantee it'll happen at least once.
Oh,
So,
definitely. Mhm.
the holidays are really challenging for a lot of people, but they don't have to be if you know how to use all of these tools and skills.
Yeah.
And if you can equip yourself to be your most evolved, empowered, incredible self. And the tools that we talked about here are a really good jump starter. And we'll continue putting out more content around this.
1,000%. One of the things that I mentioned in that article that I referred to earlier, and we'll have the link in the show notes too, is like understanding like you guys, yes, your family. So that literally doesn't mean anything other than blood aside from the meaning that gets assigned to it. One of the
Mm,
other elements, because you are our people, right? People sitting across from you at the dinner table that you're headed into, like they're people too. I think because families naturally activate our fight, flight, freeze, fawn, stress, and trauma response, I think the biggest thing that you can focus in on is modulating your stress response and your impulse control. That will go a long way. And what that will do is that will actually put your prefrontal cortex back online to be able to share or see the shared values and be able to exchange perspective, because when you can exchange perspective and you can recognize, the person on the other side of the table from me or the person standing across the kitchen that is Darvo affecting me right now, like they have a lot of crap that's happening in the world to where they're so stressed out and they're trying to manipulate the situation to make them feel better. Like you can have compassion for that. That doesn't mean you need to tolerate that, but you can see the person beyond the behavior. And I think that that's
right.
one of the biggest skill set when you think about like global leaders and people who can go through some of the crappiest geopolitical conflicts. Like there are peacemakers. The peacemakers of those have the same principles that they do in the family systems, which is understanding what shared values do we have, acting within kindness, keeping regulated, right? Seeing the person on the other side. What is their perspective, right? And really holding that, that can do a whole lot of good in a moment where maybe just because you're looking at their label or their identity or the brand, quote unquote, that they represent, you're forgetting that they're a human being underneath that too. And they're trying to
Absolutely.
human in a stressful environment too. And that's something that's always helped me too, is to recognize like everyone, right? We welcomely accept that being kind to other people is super important because we never know the battles that people are experiencing on their day to day. Yet we forget about that when it comes to family because it's already a
Yes.
battle scene more often than not. So, a lot of really goodies that you can pull away from this episode if you want proactive, reactive help, support, guidance. We are your gals. We have been studying this, we have been using this, we have been on our own evolved journeys, and it is incredible the amount of people that we've used the Evolve Survival Toolkit and how that's helped them in their most challenging times really overcome, assert boundaries, feel good about it afterwards, and actually be able to connect with some family members that they would have never seen connection coming from. So, we're always here. We're always a DM away. And we would love, love, love to hear from you. So, in closing, my episode suggestion is 144, surviving the holidays, dot, dot, dot. Bianca, what is your final takeaway and episode suggestion?
280, how to have better fights.
Love it.
The holidays are difficult for a lot of people. We don't have to make it harder on ourselves. If you can learn these skills and equip yourself, you can feel more empowered going into this time of year. We hope you utilize these tools. Like Emilia said, please, please, please reach out, and we will see you next time.
Bye,
Bye,
everyone.
everybody.